Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. As the war in the Middle East continues to push up prices, rural communities welcome extra help for rural households struggling to pay for heating oil.
I'm announcing immediate support for vulnerable heating oil customers today, providing £53 million for those households that are most exposed.
But will it be enough?
Government really does need to take a wholesale look at the costs of living and working in today's countryside and come to some policy decisions across the piece about how best to support rural areas.
We'll have more a little later. First, this week we're looking at food processing. Continuity of supply is vital for modern food businesses, and most processors plan for months or even years ahead. But when it comes to venison, a product that's increasingly available in supermarkets, there are no delivery guarantees because deer stalking can only take place at certain times of the year. And the weather has to be right for stalkers to be able to get out into the hills or forests to cull the animals. Nancy Nicholson has been to visit one of Scotland's biggest venison processors to hear how the raw product is delivered to them and how they deal with wildly fluctuating supplies.
Well, it's early morning in Dundee and there's a big refrigerated truck backing into the unloading bay here at Highland Game, and that's the back doors opening now, unveiling. It looks like hundreds of deer in there. Where have you come from this morning?
So I came from south of Scotland.
And how many larders, how many pickups?
8 ladders, and like you see, full lorry of deer.
A mix of red deer.
Red deer, fallow, sika and roe.
Well, overseeing the delivery this morning is Highland Games Sales Director Ewan Ross. So what we're seeing coming in from the lorry is very much the raw product, isn't it? It doesn't have antlers, it doesn't have a head, but otherwise it's there, it's recognisable as a deer.
That's right. The deer is harvested on the hill or in the forest. It then goes into a larder where it's essentially dressed, where the head and the feet are removed.
So what happens next?
They're inspected, then they go into the chill, and then they're prepared essentially for the next process, which is skinning and further butchery.
Can we follow them through?
We certainly can. We process in the region of 75,000 deer per annum, of which in volume terms, red is the main weight, but in terms of units, it's roe deer.
I can see that inspecting the carcasses is someone from Food Standards Scotland, I bet.
Every single carcass that passes through this particular factory is inspected.
It's a massive hive of activity in here, Ewan. They're all men that I can see, but there are dozens of them, all wearing big, long white aprons and white boots and helmets. It's incredibly busy. Is this peak time, early in the morning?
Well, really it's dictated by when the lorries come in, so it's a wild business. But no, the lorry's in today, so they're all at it.
So as we're looking at these carcasses hanging up now, there are big chunks of them cut out. Are those the areas where they've been shot?
So yes, a corrective trim is obviously is a big part of what they need to do to make sure that the quality of the protein is fit for human consumption. So final butchery work essentially prior to being stamped, and once it's stamped it can then go to the next level of the process subject to what the customer requirement is. So whether it's wholesale, food service, retail, there's lots of different processes that we then engage in. But here what you're seeing is the breakdown essentially. The far end you can see the haunches, in front of me here you can see the saddles, and on my left here you can see the shoulders. The steak is obviously one of our best selling lines. We also do another range of products that include meatballs, burgers, sausages, grilled steaks and diced. We sell a packet of venison somewhere in the UK every 7 seconds, so there's a lot of throughput going through this factory.
So we saw 200 animals coming in this morning, but as you said, it is a seasonal product. Is that your biggest challenge here, coping with these fluctuations?
It's a big challenge which we obviously try to tame, but obviously the seasons are quite limiting. If in an ideal world it would be great to get the deer the same number every day, but that's not the reality of our industry. So out of season can fluctuate from 100 to 200 deer in a week, and it can be up to 1,000 deer in a day in peak times.
Thousands?
So it takes a lot of planning to make sure that we have the right resources in place to carry out the process as efficiently as possible.
That report from Nancy Nicholson. New laws to protect livestock from dog attacks come into force tomorrow. The Dogs Protection of Livestock Act covers England and Wales. Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own legislation. It's the first time the law around livestock worrying has changed since it was introduced more than 70 years ago. The government says livestock numbers have doubled since then and more people are visiting the countryside with their dogs. The changes include new powers for police, the use of DNA testing to identify dogs which attack, and dog owners can now be ordered to pay for the cost of seizing and detaining their dog. There'll also be scope to issue an unlimited fine. Previously, the maximum penalty was £1,000. Phil Latham farms in Cheshire. He welcomes the new laws and told me what happened when his calves were attacked in the farmyard.
Over the years, we've had 2 attacks where we've had large dogs, which we can see from the bite wounds and the claw marks on the sides and flanks of the animals. But we've had 2 attacks, I think 8 in the first instance and 18 calves last time out of a pen of 20 that were housed and inside. So they had significant wounds. One ended up getting shot, but it was a horrific incident that took 5 hours with 2 vets and 3 members of staff to try and patch everything up, and then all the resultant work that followed on. So huge vet bills, awful amount of stress for the animals and the staff and the vets who burst into tears. It was pretty horrific.
If the new laws had been in place at the time, would it make any difference?
Well, I think the first thing is that as it was our second attack, the first attack didn't seem to change anybody's behaviour. I think if you knew that you had an unlimited fine facing you as a dog owner, should your dogs behave in that way, then I think that would give you an incentive not to allow your dogs to roam and to cause such damage. The second thing I would say is that we had DNA swabs of the bite wounds at the time, but there was nothing to compel a dog owner at that time to provide a comparative hair sample. Nothing at all that the police could do. Unless you had an eyewitness at the point of the attack, there really is or was very little anybody could do to pursue any lines of inquiry to identify which were the offending dogs, which seems utterly ridiculous. I think now the fact that dog owners and the police have more investigative powers, that is a profound change to the level of responsibility that dog owners have to face up to.
So do you think in your case, if the law had been changed at that time, then a prosecution could have been brought?
Yes, I do. I think that would have made a big difference to our circumstances. And as it is at the moment, we're £5,000 out of pocket. I think the ability to get DNA evidence and prove that a particular dog caused those particular wounds is massively important going forward.
Going forward then, what is the answer?
Well, I think understanding the serious impact of these attacks on rural businesses, the constant erosion of profits through dog owners' irresponsible behaviour, it has a massive impact across the industry.
We're in lambing season now, so will this make a difference to prosecutions or the way that the police can act if we're going to get sheep worrying cases as well?
Well, obviously, I'm a dairy farmer. I've no experience of what it's like to be a sheep farmer with dog attacks during lambing or at any other time. But I think the very fact that irresponsible dog owners can now be held to account to a much higher level, what we actually need is the police to bare their teeth, quite literally, and get stuck in and prosecute some people to send out that message that people will be held to account now that the law has changed.
Farmer Phil Latham. Rural households struggling to pay for heating oil are to receive government help with their bills. The war in the Middle East has had a massive impact on global supplies of oil, gas and fertiliser, pushing up prices. In a press conference yesterday, the Prime Minister pledged to help people who've seen their bills soar. Energy prices will be capped until the end of June, and the cut in fuel duty has been extended until September. Keir Starmer said the government was going to support rural communities with the cost of heating oil.
I'm announcing immediate support for vulnerable heating oil customers today, providing £53 million for those households that are most exposed.
Well, Graham Biggs is from the Rural Services Network. He gave me his reaction.
I'm sure this initial announcement will make a difference. There's plenty of examples of people being really, really worried about the impact on their heating oils, people having to eke out the last of the tank. Any help is going to be of significant benefit, I've no doubt. We all know that the devil lies in the details.
How's it going to work, do you think, getting this money out to people to help them?
Well, it's interesting. Certainly, in terms of England, it's going to be distributed to the local authorities. I mean, there's clearly going to be issues there because the government sets the national framework, but it allows each local authority to set much of the detail. Whether or not for this particular aspect of the scheme, government will dictate that it all has to go on the oil crisis, as it were. We just don't know yet from the detail. But if it doesn't, then we could find very different schemes being delivered by different neighbouring authorities.
Keir Starmer mentioned there the word vulnerable. I wonder whether that actually means that not everyone is going to get help. Do we know?
Oh, it's certainly not going to be everyone. It is explicitly for vulnerable people, which is also going to include, of course, the less well-off. Certainly in rural areas, there's another aspect of the fuel crisis, of course, which is the impact on fuel and diesel for cars and other vehicles. And that's a huge cost in rural areas where there is little or no public transport, and the car is an essential. Huge rises in diesel and petrol costs having to be met by families.
Well, the government can't keep an open chequebook longer term. What happens next?
I honestly think that longer term, the government needs to review the additional costs and circumstances which appertain in rural areas, so that we don't continue having to have this question about how long does the chequebook stay open for, treating them as some sort of special expense. These are the costs for people who live and work in our countrysides. They have to be recognised, and they're not at the moment.
And so what would you recommend?
I think that what the government is proposing in terms of intending to regulate heating oil is a step in the right direction. If I look at the government's own press release, it refers to heating oil being different from other sectors in the energy market because it doesn't have the same consumer protections, not regulated by Ofgem. And the government's intention is new consumer protection for heating oil customers. Indeed, the £50 million of targeted financial support, which has been announced, is described as being something to bridge the gap between the, if you like, the regulated sector of the on-gas grid network and the unregulated oil sector. We'll need to see the detail of that, but the commitment to do it and the government's support to the Competition and Markets Authority, who's planning to carry out a more comprehensive examination of the heating oil industry, clearly to be welcomed. Government really does need to take a wholesale look at the costs of living and working in today's countryside and come to some policy decisions across the piece about how best to support rural areas.
Graham Biggs from the Rural Services Network. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer is Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.